Welcome to the Felt Dyslexic Artist Interview. My name is Liz Buckridge. For me, as a dyslexic artist, other artists and creatives have always been my number one inspiration. In these interviews, we talk with artists and creatives who share their stories and gain insight into their process, from inspiration to art tips to career building and more. We're so lucky to listen to the wisdom of Adam Cutler today. I'm so excited to hear about his past and future projects and share insights on life as an artist. Hi, Adam.
Hi, Liz.
Thank you for talking with us today. I'm going to jump right in. And this is going to be a little bit different, I think, than past interviews. So I'm super excited about it. But describe the art you make. What medium do you primarily work in, and why do you choose that medium?
Yeah, so primarily when I am making art, there's two forms. I think the primary one in terms of like what people consider to be art would be found object art. And my wife, Jody, she paints canvases sometimes and then decides that they're not what she wants. And we have this collection that is enviable in terms of found objects that we found on the beach when we used to live in Rhode Island, or things that we found in our adventures and our travels. And when she discards a canvas, I tend to end up taking that and then making a whole bunch of stuff on top of it, or affixing it, or doing my Joseph Cornell sort of thing with that. On a daily basis, for sure, it's playing my guitars, and I have crazy ADHD. And if you gave me like two nails and a spring between it where it went boing, I would do that until somebody came along and killed me. So the guitar is just a bigger, badder version of that. So, I don't have any aspirations of like playing out or playing at a club or something like that. I just love to make my beautiful noise in here. And, it's a way to come down at the end of the day. But primarily, that's not, neither of those are my jobs. I'm a designer, and some people would argue that design and art are two different things, or that they're the same. I think they differ in that when I'm designing, I am solving somebody's problem, whether it's my own or somebody else's. Art is for my own personal enjoyment or for others' enjoyment, depending on what I might do with it. But it was a way for me to channel all of my artistic itches that were encouraged in large part by my parents, but also they didn't think I was going to make a successful career out of being an artist. And so as I wanted to get more serious and I wanted to go to art school, they kept pushing me in the other direction. And I think back then it was a different time where you could talk out to your parents or talk back to your parents, but you also kind of towed the line a little bit. And so I decided that I was going to change the angle towards design and understanding what it meant to apply my creative and artistic urges to problems, things that would have an outcome that would benefit other people, whether it was for, a commercial purpose or whether it was for some greater good, and hopefully both.
That's cool. So I think you kind of already answered this question. I was going to ask you, describe the art you make and what mediums do you primarily work in, and why do you choose those mediums? Um, so, and do you work in any other mediums? But I think that you
Well, I
kind
mean,
of,
I didn't really touch on what it is that I do, but I'm responsible. So I'm a distinguished designer at IBM. I've been there for 24 years, and for the last 7 or 8 years, my primary focus has been on how do we design artificial intelligence so that it benefits humanity, that it's responsible, and that it's ethical. So my main medium is both like thought capital, like how do you get 3,000 people to go in one direction, or if it's the entire company, 300,000 people to go in one direction and to do things a certain way, all in the name of responsibility and ethicality, all that stuff. But the other thing is, pixels, bits and bytes. It's what shows up on the screen. Or now that we're starting to get into voice interfaces, it's like considering the psychology behind a conversation and what resonates between two human beings, and what happens when you take this human out of it and you put a machine there. And how do we build something that, how do we create something that builds trust between the human and the machine, because eventually we'll rely on these things in the same way that I'm sure whether it's you or somebody you know, they've completely ceded control to understanding how to go from A to B without opening Google Maps or Apple Maps. In the same way as AI becomes more of a regular part of our lives, there are going to be certain things that we're just like, yeah, I don't need to know that anymore. I don't need to worry about that anymore. And uh, I want to make sure that the skills and the reasoning behind doing the things that we do stay intact, even if we don't choose to do them after a while. Whoa.
How did you get into making art? Tell us about your background and how you first became interested in art. Do you remember when you were little?
I do. I mean, I've been doodling, drawing, sketching, sculpting. I mean, as long as I can remember, it was something that was very much encouraged in my house, my mom especially, but my dad too. He is really good at, he was really good at drawing and drawing much better than I could at the time. You know, my stuff looked like I was doing it left-handed back then. But my mom was always putting me in front of different crafts and activities, and I thought it was just the best part of the day, like whether it was at school or if we were doing it at home. And I remember applying it in a bunch of different ways, but for me, like a seminal moment in my career and in my life was being 7 years old, and my parents took me and my brother to go see Star Wars, and I had no idea what I was really in for. And you know, now movies are like that all the time. My little 7 year old brain could not take what I saw. Like my brains were dribbling out my ears, and back then there was no internet and there wasn't like all this stuff that you could buy at the toy store or whatever. So I had these like unbelievable pictures in my head from seeing this movie. And my dad was a research scientist, and he'd bring home like piles of scrap paper like this big, and I had it in a drawer in my desk. And I would sit there with like the Beatles on the record player, and I would try to draw from memory, like what did I see in Star Wars? And I was frustrated why my drawings didn't look the way, like I wanted it to look cool, and it looked like some shitty drawing that some shitty kid made. And there was a classmate of mine who was like a really good uh, sketcher drawer, you know, and I was like, teach me what to do. And he gave me some of the basics around like, this is how you think in 3 dimensions, and this is what perspective is. And I don't think either of us had the words for that yet, but he was definitely showing me things. And all of a sudden, I started looking at the page differently and how the ideas came out the end of my pencil. And yeah, I mean, there was never a point in my life where making things wasn't part of the plan or part of what I do.
Love that. How did you get into your specific style? What themes or subjects inspire your work?
I mean, so like if you think about it, with my found object art, collage, that sort of thing, it's I never really thought of it until saying these words right now. It is super indicative of like my ADHD mind. And I didn't realize that I had ADHD like my entire life. Uh, but I got diagnosed when I was 35. And so there's this thing that like once you're made aware of it, you can't be unaware of it. And so then you start going backwards in time and trying to align it with this thing that you know. And what was funny for me is like understanding that I take in every last bit of information that I can consume with no direct purpose of taking it in that moment. But then when it's time to solve a problem or to make a piece or to do something where I'm making, all of a sudden, like these feelers are out there looking for these little bits of inspiration that I just sort of tucked away. And so I think there's a really like my work is not structured and organized. My stuff is much more organic and intuitive. There are things that I tried to evoke, but at the end of the day, it's what are these weird things that are popping into my head, and can I make interesting juxtapositions between them to make somebody laugh or think or whatever.
I love that. So you've already talked about this a little bit, but do you consider yourself neurodivergent or neurotypical?
No, I am neurodivergent, 100% neurodivergent. And I'm, you know, I don't there's no stigma behind it. IBM is a big company, and I'm an executive there. And I was asked if I would be one of the sponsors for our neurodivergent interest group on the campus, which here in Austin is like 3 or 4 thousand people. Uh, and I serve as inspiration to a number of people because I'm so open about my neurodivergence. And I talk about it as if it's, like I used to have brown hair or that there are gray hairs on my chin or whatever. My eyes are brown. Like it's not something to be ashamed of. It's just the way I am. And, it does color everything that I do, whether it's like my hardcore work at IBM or whether it's the stuff I'm playing on the guitar or the art that I'm making or just how I basically go about my day. It's like I take all these external influences and entertain myself all day by making these weird little combinations all the time.
Have you ever faced any challenges or setbacks in your art career, and how did you overcome them?
Well, I think I was talking about it at the beginning. Like it was less about my career and more about like what I really wanted to do. So I guess in a way it is about my career, but like it was the direction that I wanted to take my life in. And and my dad wasn't having any of it. So I think it was the beginning was like, well, I was told like you can't go to art school. And I was like, what am I going to do here? And so I started looking at like the closest adjacent spaces that I could find that would let me be artistic and make things and not have to sit at a desk with fluorescent overhead lights and, crunch numbers in a spreadsheet or some shit like that. I definitely didn't want to do that. So for me at the time, I mean, again, the internet wasn't a thing and, computers were like just barely a thing at that point. And I was like, well, I'll go into advertising because I can get paid money doing that. And I can be like a copywriter or an art director. So I pivoted and I put my effort into that. And what that helped me learn, especially on the copywriting side of it, but also on the art direction side, was really how to harness the ADHD, that it was the source of how I could come up with these unexpected little nuggets that make for great billboards when you're driving past them 70 miles an hour. And I'd also gone to school for psychology. So I was interested in the way that people think and how they consume information and how it's delivered and that sort of thing. And then my brother sent me a modem for Christmas one year. It might have been like 1992, 93. And I got online for the first time and I looked at AOL. It was like that was the only. It was like AOL, CompuServe, and Prodigy or something like that. And it was all bad. And I was like, why doesn't this look good? Why can't this be visually appealing too? And sort of tried my hand at doing something like that. And I was, whatever. Okay. But when I saw the first web browser and I saw one of the very first web pages. I think there were like 400 web pages total on the internet at this point. And I looked at that and I was like, okay, here is a new form of expression. In the same way that, back in the late 70s, early 80s, somebody looked at a turntable and they said, instrument instead of playback machine. And so I saw the internet as not only like, here's a thing that you can use for organizing information and finding other pieces of information, but that there was a new form of expression. And I threw myself into that. And I wanted to understand, like, how do you make when it's not something that you're physically manipulating, but more like intellectually manipulating to get it to do the things that you want to do. And at the beginning, it was so rudimentary and like all the stuff we take for granted now, like none of that was available. But I figured out how to get creative with what was there in that space. And so yeah, maybe I didn't go to art school, but there was this interesting set of like sliding doors that as I made these choices, it was like I was putting myself in the right place at the right time. And, sure, there's a whole bunch of luck, but I also had some like natural ability to understand how to do some of this stuff.
Yeah, well, plus you like to work hard.
Well, no, I don't know that I like to work hard. I just do work hard. That's why it's work and not play.
So, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Avon, Connecticut.
Did you do art when you were a little kid? Tell us more about that.
Yeah, all the time. I mean, my mom put me in like you know, standalone art classes, you know, that were either done through the town. I was always dialed in to whatever my art classes were. And that was back at a time when like art classes were well funded, art teachers were well funded, and there was these, you know, our art rooms were just packed to the gills with everything, and they were letting us do stuff like play with hot wax to make batik and things like that. Like I can't picture that happening today. Where like, oh, somebody's going to get burned, so the teacher has to do something for the kid, which is beside the point. But like I used to love it, all of it. You know, oh, we get to play with clay today. Great. Oh, we get to make with pipe cleaners. Super. Well, we're going to draw with pastels. Awesome. Like I loved all of that. Uh, and then I think when I was like a sophomore in high school, for whatever reason, I just really, really, really wanted a 35 millimeter camera. And I think I got it for my 16th birthday. And then I threw myself into taking pictures. And that was a thing for, well, I mean, it still is. And it's kind of interesting now that we all carry these super high powered cameras in our pockets. But like back then, I was the one who was always running around with a 35 millimeter camera around their neck, taking pictures of everything and learning how to compose and learning about light, and in a way that's different from like learning about light and color when you're drawing or painting or whatever. It's like how do you capture it versus how do you recreate it. So I did that for a long time and throughout college too. But yeah, all of it sort of comes together when the internet shows up. Or actually, I take that back. When desktop publishing was a thing, like we all take that for granted right now. But like back when like you could do some sort of layout online to make like a newsletter or a zine or something like that, that was all brand new. And when I first saw Photoshop for the first time, I was in a special class when I was at school, and we had a room that was filled with the newest, most powerful Macintoshes at the time, and these things were like rare. And one of the very first color printers, and they gave us a beta version of Photoshop and a beta version of Illustrator, and they said we all need to figure this out. None of us know what we're doing. And the first time that I touched Photoshop, and I was like, I can manipulate photos, like I can do anything I want. I can cut things out. I can recast them. Like that to me was like, oh, I could spend days, months, years doing this. And I eventually did through my job. But yeah, I mean, all of these things sort of lead through and to one another. And I'm still doing it today.
I actually really like your series right now of taking photos of stickers.
Yeah.
What's that all about?
So uh, for the first half of my career at IBM, I was a consultant, which meant I was on planes all over the world, meeting with clients wherever I was. And it started in Stockholm, Sweden. I went there for some meeting, and I found myself at the end of the day with nothing to do, and it was sort of too early to get dinner. And so I was just wandering around downtown Stockholm, and it was like, uh, you know, that time of the year up there where it's like dark all the time. So it's like dark, and I'm wandering around. It's snowy and cold and slushy, and I had one of the first camera phones, like that, those little tiny candy bar phones. And it was one of the first that had a little tiny camera that took like the shittiest pictures that were like the size of postage stamps. And I'm walking around and there's all these like street art stickers everywhere. And I'm like, well, that's a cool one. And that's a cool one. And I remember having the thought, I wish I had my camera with me, which I didn't. And then I was like, oh, I have a little stupid camera on my phone. Maybe it'll be cool and lo-fi, you know, like grungy sort of stuff. So I just started taking pictures, and I was like, well, I can kill a couple hours like this. And it was like, I don't know, 3 or 4 hours later, and I was like cold and hungry. And I was like, oh, I've been doing this for a while. So that was the beginning of the collection. And then, you know, with each phone that came out that had a better camera, it was a new excuse for me to go run around taking pictures of street art and stickers and graffiti wherever I was, because it was something that allowed me to explore a city with purpose without necessarily needing to have a destination. It was just like, oh, it seems like all the cool clubs or the cool places are over there. And then you go there and, you know, it's covered in stickers. And each one of those is this individual expression of some artist. But there's also built-in subversiveness with it, which is they made it specifically to be on a sticker so somebody could go deface public property somewhere with the sticker. And like, I just kind of love having that all rolled together. And yeah, like when Instagram came out, I was like, well, I'm not the kind of guy who's going to be sitting there taking selfies of myself, or, every once in a while it'll be like, here's a food shot. But I was like, this is the place for my sticker stuff. And so it's funny, by posting all these different artists, they see their stuff posted with me, by me from all the different places they visit. And then they follow me. So now I'm connected to a bunch of these different street artists on Instagram. And it's just like, I don't know, it's the weirdest thing. It brings me joy, but it's like, I never talk about it like this, and I never advertise it. I'm not like at a bar being like, so let me tell you about my obsession with taking pictures of stickers. Like, I don't talk about it, but it's just like this makes me happy, just for myself and nobody else.
I'm obsessed with it personally. Okay, so this is my favorite question personally. Um, do you have a favorite colorway for your art? And is the colorway for your art different or the same as the colors in your house?
Well, being married to a fellow designer and fellow artist, color choices are not up to me here. Like in this space, this is mine, but the rest of the house is more of Jody's domain. And I'm happy because she's awesome at doing that. So I can't say that my work is necessarily reflected. I think it's more my work is more reflected in the way that the house is decorated, where there's like constantly something new to look at and see. And like people are always kind of interested by us when they come to the house because we're both designers and they expect it to be like ultra minimalist. And our house is not ultra minimalist. There's like a little greeble to look at on every surface. And, things are sort of fit and tucked in places, but there's always something. And that's, I mean, again, you go to the ADHD mind, it's how it gets organized, how it gets decorated. And, ultimately, is there a beginning or an end to any of this? It's just a different canvas, right? It's the one that you have to walk around in every day versus hang on the wall.
I think that you do have a lot of mid-century modern lines, though.
Oh, well, that was definitely, that was all me, right? So that's what I said. Like the decorating is more on me, whereas like the paint and the color choices are like, I'll say, this is the type of thing, and Jody will say, okay, well, that thing is going to be gray, or these things are going to be blue, and I'm like, okay, cool. But yeah, the whole mid-century theme throughout the first floor of the house, including in here, was all product of the pandemic. Uh, I was looking at, it's like when you pre-pandemic, we were always on the go and always either on a plane or at the office. And so as a result, you sort of don't pay as much attention to your house because you're not in it all the time. You're always somewhere else, and you come home for dinner and you hang out and you watch a little TV and have a glass of wine or something, and then you go to bed and do it all over again. When we were stuck here, I was like, man, as designers, we are super unconsidered with our living space. It was like things that we liked, but none of it was sort of cohesive, right? And we had done the dining room, and it was primarily mid-century pieces. And then one day I was looking at it through the right light or the right mindset or whatever, and I was like, the whole downstairs needs to be like this. And I went to Jody and I said, you're going to let me do this one, and I'm going to find these pieces. I will confer with you, but I'm going to make this happen. And I definitely did that.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So describe the space where you make your art, or maybe describe the space where we are right now.
Yeah, so this is my office where we are right now. You're more or less sitting at my desk, and then there's this old 60s piece behind me, that the bookshelf, but my guitar is in the other corner. It's never lit. It's very low lit in here. I love to work in really dim yellow light. I don't like having, lights like this on me at all. So like I'm being very good right now with that light on me. Um, it's always low lit, if lit at all. Everything is sort of warm and wood, and it definitely carries the mid-century vibe from out there in here. But I think this is the only room in the house that has like cream walls and then a black wall. Like it's meant to be my little cozy spot.
I love it. How did your school system support your interest in art growing up?
Well, like I said, we had a well-funded art program, so that did not hurt at all. But I was also given the opportunity to be in talented and gifted program, and so that like had extra art in it. Like that was where they were like, oh, here's this, you know, ridiculously large video camera, but it was like, oh my god, we have a video camera, and then like a rudimentary way to edit on videotape. And me and one of my friends were like, oh, we're gonna make videos, like we're gonna shoot our own stuff, and that to me was super empowering to have equipment that was, the crappy version of it, but it was like I could make my own TV show, or I could make something that is like a TV show. And like that to me was super exciting. And it was things like that. But then um, I don't even know if they do this anymore, but when I was in high school, like I was able to get into AP art. So that was where every kid in the class was really focused on it and serious about it. It wasn't like the art teacher was just trying to corral three-quarters of the kids, but that we were all there to make. And so um, I remember really forming a great relationship with oh, I think we all did, but with my art teacher. She was always pushing on me to go past what I saw and put more into it. And it was funny trying to get to a certain style and almost trying to go a little more towards like the draftsman sort of way at the time. Like that was kind of what I wanted to do because it was born out of that Star Wars, draw the Star Wars stuff. But then it was like, oh, I could make my friends laugh by drawing these goofy characters and stuff like that. And so it started to get a little more surreal and fantastic. And sometimes those things would come together, sometimes they wouldn't. But the school system was really good. Like I had every opportunity to be artistically involved, and I took advantage of everything that I possibly could that was associated with that.
Awesome. How do you see your work evolving and changing in the future? What do you have planned?
Well, given that I'm working in AI, this is an interesting time to be doing what I do because we went from, machine learning and sort of theoretical, like what would it be like, to have this thing really be able to respond to us to like ChatGPT less than a year and a half ago, maybe a little less, whatever. But like all of a sudden it's starting to change the way that we think. And again, to me this is every bit as important as like when we made the shift like from pen and ink, pen and paper and photostat machines to the computer, and then from the personal computer to desktop publishing to the internet and then social media, mobile computing. Like these things have changed our lives irrevocably. Like there's no going back from it. And this to me is like um, to date the granddaddy of them all. It's really going to change the way that we go about the way that we do things. So there's part of me that is a little nervous, but there's more of me that is really optimistic and hopeful that um, something that I've talked about in a lot of the different talks that I give around this is that we are on the cusp of a new era in terms of how we interact with the things around us. That it's been transactional to this point. I push a button, my toast is made. I do a thing, I ask for a thing, it comes back. I think we're going to start getting more into the relationship era of product design, not just from a computer perspective, but these things are going to have the ability to respond back to us. And so what do you do with that space? And what is the artistic opportunity in there? Because there'll be plenty of things where people, brands and corporations are going to use this to market to us. And I'm not really thrilled about that. But at the same time, it's inevitable. So in that, you also will start to find new forms of expression. And it's not just help me write a book or help me write a paper or write an excuse for me not to go out tonight or something like that. But like, when does this thing go from the playback machine to the, instrument? Like, what does that look like? And then how does that evolve? Because the introduction of something is always like, wow, but it's when it matures and it starts to become its own thing, like what does that look like? And then how many thousands or millions of different things are going to branch off of all of this in the same way that it did with the internet or with the computer or anything like. I just like, for anybody who would say that like, oh, technology isn't art or whatever. It's like it's just another medium. It's no more or less pure than anything else. It's about what you're thinking and what you're feeling and how it comes out of your hand. So if that's at the end of a paintbrush, cool. If it's at the end of a keyboard or a mouse or a digital drawing tablet, so be it. It's all one and the same. It's just where does it end up and how does it end up and how do people consume it? And as long as it's creating something that's an emotional reaction, something for people to feel something about, I mean, who cares how you do it?
Well, actually, that's my next question. Is making art an emotional process or a strategic process for you?
Oh, for me, 100% emotional. Like I don't go in with a plan. Like I'm not, sitting here at my desk doing something and be like, oh, I know exactly when I lay out all the tools and materials and things that I need. And, I sketch it out on a piece of paper before it. There's multiple reasons. One, which we've covered, is my ADHD. Two, though, that's my everyday. I do have to measure twice, cut once, think about things, get organized, get a whole bunch of people organized, figure out how we're going to take on these smaller tasks to do a bigger thing. If I'm going to sit down to make something, I want it to be wild and uncontrolled. I want it to be chaotic. I want it to be like what's happening in the moment. What's the music that's on right now? Or, what's the weather like outside? Or am I in a good mood or a bad mood? And, um, that to me is everything. Like, why would I just keep doing what I'm doing at work when it's like my time off? Like, I need to have the difference, you know?
Um, so could you walk us through your creative process from idea to finished piece?
Yeah. So when it comes to like making like a piece of art, it's really about broad experimentation. So like I'll go through that massive library of found objects and old vintage magazines and postcards, and I've been through it all 100,000 times, but you never know what's going to hit you on a certain day. So sometimes I'll open like a certain drawer, or I'll go to a certain area and I'll be like, there's things in this neighborhood that I'm interested in. And then I start picking through it. And then I'm like, oh, this is kind of interesting. And I set it aside and I make a big pile. And then I sit down with that pile and whatever I'm making it on, might be like an old drawer from an antique dresser, or, maybe it's like just a piece of wood or one of Jody's canvases. And then I just start grabbing the things, especially going towards the ones I particularly had an affinity for in that moment. I'm like, okay, how are we going to use this thing? And then I play with it and I start dropping things where I think they might go, or just maybe like I don't know where to go. So it goes there. And then sometimes I'll walk away from it just to like have fresh eyes, but sometimes I'll sit there and I sort of approach it like a puzzle. Like, does this fit here? What's the conversation between these two elements? Is there like, some color blocking behind it? And can I play off of the border between it or something like that? And then sometimes I'm super motivated to get that shit done and get it out the door. And then there's other times where I'm like, I don't know. It's missing a certain something. So 2 years later, I walk by it and I'm like, oh, I know what to do. And then it goes up on the wall or whatever we do with it. But like, it could be either or. And that's decidedly different than what I do for work, which is I have an idea, like a guiding light, a North Star. And that thing I check into a lot. I do a lot of research. Like, am I full of crap, or is this really something that could change the way that people think? And if I get the right validation, then I start amassing a whole bunch of thoughts. And I am similar to the process when I'm making art. I'm indiscriminate and I'm non-judgmental. I write down anything that pops into my head. Sometimes it's these like little weird juxtapositions from my ADHD where there's something I read 6 months ago and I'm like, oh yeah. And then there was that like Marvel movie I saw and there was a thing in there, and I jam all these weird ideas together and it sort of starts to click around like, what am I trying to say? Like, how am I trying to tell other people about this idea in my head? And how can I make a metaphor, an analogy that helps them get where I'm trying to go with it? And then it's about the refinement of all of that junk that goes down, and you start looking for a story, because I really do think, at least in that particular aspect of my life, that work, and in general though, having a story to tell is super important. And I think it's part of it is anybody can tell a story, even if you're not very good at it. We do it all the time. Hey, how was your day? Oh, it was good. This guy was a jerk to me, that kind of stuff. But some people, if you put the effort into it, can be like really great storytellers. And I took all these different things like human psychology and advertising, where you're telling these little miniature 30-second stories, or three to 7 word stories up on a billboard. And I started taking that and applying it to these like giant technical concepts. And um, I've gotten pretty good at helping people explain super complex things in very simple terms. And then it's about, how do you take that idea and then teach all these other individual free thinking designers to use this as the template for how they need to think about something, right? So I helped to create our design thinking platform at IBM. I created the first version of our design language, which is like all of our visual assets that we put into our software. And now I'm doing the same thing for like, how do you do that for AI? And like when you start narrowing down off of that initial big hunk of stuff, what you come out with is like a series of principles or like concepts that you follow in order to understand what the person on the other end of whatever it is that you're making, how did they accept it? How did they receive it? How did they interact with it? And how did they walk away feeling like that was one of the better parts of my day? Like instead of this stupid thing. I mean, how many things do we all have in life where we're like, this thing, this company, my bank, whatever. There's always something that pisses us off. Uh, Anything that I try to touch that comes under that purview, and for us, it's in a business sense. I just try to think about like, how can I make somebody's day suck a little bit less, uh, and go from there.
Imagine if we all walked around that way.
Gosh, it would be lovely, but I don't think we really think like that anymore.
Well, you're pushing back, aren't you?
I'm trying.
Um, so I don't know if this applies to you because I think you do art for fun, but how do you combine the art you love to make and the art you sell?
Yeah, I don't sell art, so I'm an anomaly for your program here. Yeah, to me, it's all for fun. It's all an outlet, but it's also taking the things that I learn when I'm doing the artistic stuff and then plowing it back into the work. So true to form, all the way back when it was like, well, you have to make that pivot. I'm still trying to make this part of my life as fun as possible and as creative as possible, even when the stakes are infinitely higher than, I hope somebody buys this piece of art or something like that. I still want that. Oh, that made me feel a certain way. I still want that.
Wow. Um, so I guess that answers that. How do people find your art to purchase? You cannot.
No.
And can you share a recent project of work that you're particularly happy about?
Yeah. So I just alluded to it. So it started about this time last year. It was a little earlier, like mid-November, and I was asked to come up with the artificial intelligence user experience patterns for all of our software products. Uh, and that's not a simple task. There's a lot of little moving bits and pieces, and it's really about creating that toolkit that everybody else uses. So if you think of it like in your terms, it's like if it were a box of pastels, I have to invent all the colors and figure out how to package all those colors and figure out how to tell people like, if this is your first time using a pastel, do it like this and not like that. Except for all the little doodads and widgets that you use to actually get at whatever you're doing on a screen. And so we just released it maybe like 6 months ago, but we released our artificial intelligence user experience pattern library. It's called Carbon for AI, and it's open source, so it allows developers all over the world who are not part of IBM. Anyone can pick these elements up and use them for themselves in their own AI projects, as well as all the stuff that we make.
That's pretty cool. How do you stay motivated?
Um, I am driven by the question. And I feel like if you're constantly chasing the answer. Like you end up like the dog that catches the garbage truck. It's more fun when the dog doesn't catch the garbage truck. Like, what does the dog do when it catches the garbage truck? So for me, it's not about having the right answer. It's like, can we ask the next question that makes everybody go, oh, yeah, look, yeah, what does that mean? And then it starts a whole new school of thought, or you get people who are super interested in some sub aspect of what you're talking about or what you're trying to do. So what keeps me going is like, can I keep coming up with good questions, or can other people pose great questions to me? And the better the question, the more entertained I am, and the more I want to try to see if there's an answer somewhere, or if there's just something that I should go dig around on. And to me, that's like, I don't know, my lifelong curiosity. It's always been there. I've never lost it. And I think that's something that a lot of people who don't become artists, or people who don't become like organic, sort of messy artists like myself, like that, um, that willingness to sort of grab onto the chaos and embrace it versus like, I got to plan everything out. There's something in there that makes it all worth doing. It's always exciting to me, as opposed to like, well, it's time to make the donuts. I come back and all of my tools are in the same place. And it's like, oh, I still have to do that thing there versus like, what do I feel like today?
Yeah. Are there any artists or creatives who have influenced or inspired your work?
Plenty. If I had to pick like a good handful, I would say Salvador Dali and Rene Magritte, both of them, for me, like when I really started getting into art, you learn about like the Impressionists, or you learn about the Baroque period and things like that at school. And inevitably you get to that little, the modern art section. And the first time I saw anything surrealistic, I was like, I don't know what it is, but I'm right there at home with that. I mean, maybe it was because my parents showed me like the Beatles' Yellow Submarine when I was little, but there's just something super appealing about it. And that got me super interested in the surrealist movement, but then all of the adjacent spaces around it, like, that were happening at around the same time. And I think that sort of informed some of my sensibilities, that it didn't always have to make sense, and that it was actually a little more fun when it didn't make sense, or when you were like, well, I don't know what to do with that mentally. Like I kind of enjoyed that. And then without a doubt, more so than anyone else, Charles and Ray Eames. Like to me, I mean, this is a Charles and Ray Eames desk. We're both sitting on Eames chairs. Like, I just loved how they looked at serious problems through the lens of play, and that to me was just like everything. They were the role models for me. Like when I saw a documentary about them, I must have been like 10 or 11 or something like that. And I just sort of thought, well, like that seems like the dream job right there. Like you get to design all sorts of cool things because it's about helping people live better. And they're also doing it in a way where they're trying to be conscious of the design choices they're making to make it with the fewest parts possible, or to reduce the cost as much as possible. And I remember the guy who lived next door to me, for his birthday one year, he got the Polaroid SX70 land, camera, where like it folded flat, and it like had that industrial design where it sort of popped up like that, and then it took an instant picture. I just thought that is the coolest thing ever. And then there's a whole document, or like a whole thing that the Eames office made on that particular product and how they had a hand in it. And I was fascinated by all of it. And so I started reading books about them. And, I didn't know what to expect when I started getting into it, but so many of their lessons and their philosophy is through everything that I do. I mean, they're always like right here in the forefront of my mind.
I feel like they're simplifiers too.
Absolutely. And not just simplification to try to take away as much as possible to make it as minimal as possible. They did it with like these lovely organic curves, or like a lip on it, or, when they figure out how to press and bend plywood, and you get these like wonderfully warm shapes and concepts, and they seem like they came from the future, but like a future that was like, in a couple days. Like it didn't look like it was like from the 21st century, like it was made out of wood. It wasn't like silver and gleaming. It was like this cozy thing that was in your house. But it also had these like funky sort of space age lines to it. And it just sort of said like, if it was a chair, like come sit in me, or if it's like an object that they would make for like a tabletop, it's like come play with me, like there was an invitation to interact with their stuff versus like here's a desk.
Not so serious, right?
No, yeah, like there's an element of play. Like even on this desk, there's like color panels on it, and it's like who's really going to see the color panels? But they're there.
Very cool. What advice would you give to an aspiring artist looking to pursue a career in the arts?
I mean, have your own point of view. I think that is the single most important thing for anybody. I don't care what it is that you do, whether it's a white collar job, a blue collar job, a creative job, or a technical job. I think having a point of view is something that is uniquely yours. And when you're an artist, there's a temptation to gravitate or fall back into the things that are an influence on you. And it's sort of stark. It's sort of like, oh, I see the influence here. And it's like, you don't want that. You want to have your own thing. And in order to do that, you have to have a point of view. And to have a point of view means that you have to stop and take a good, long, deep breath and think to yourself, like, what's important to me? And what am I trying to do here? If it's just raw expression, even that as an intent means something, because then you can dial up the intensity, or you can dial it back, or you can get weird with it, or you can get like very serious and literal and take your anger out on something that's bothering you, whether it's something that's happening in the world or something that's happening personally. Like there's a way to channel that. But if you don't name it, if you don't have a think about it, um, I mean, what are you really doing? You're just sort of expressing, and there's nothing wrong with it. I'm not here to gatekeep anybody, but I do feel like if you have a point of view on something, it gives you something that's uniquely your own, and it gives you the ability to find your own twist on it and to then further make it your own, like to evolve whatever that first little thing was. It starts to grow, and you can see like, oh, this is when you started thinking about the concept, or this was your point of view, and here it is 5 years after, and here it is 10 years after, and to see how that sort of works its way through. And if you really think about it, we don't stop doing this. So the earlier you have one, you'll come up with a different point of view around a different form of art, or maybe about something that's uh, sort of related, but not entirely related. And then there's the things that are just happening around us. And as these points of view start to come together, it becomes something bigger than just this is how I feel about when I apply paint to canvas, or object to canvas, or something like that. So, yeah, a point of view.
Point of view and your story arc.
Yeah, well, if you have a point of view, the story usually comes with it. You would hope, at least, because, like, I suppose it would be possible for somebody to have a point of view and be like, "Yeah, it's my point of view," and I'm not really interested in sharing my point of view. That's sort of foreign to me. But I could see how that might be a thing. But at the end of the day, if you have a point of view, usually it means like I need to tell other people, and that point of view says this is where I stand on something, or this is where I stand on how I do things, or this is my approach. And I think it informs the art itself too, both as you're making it and for the person who's enjoying it. Um, if you have that point of view, it's there, like um, we always joke about it. And this isn't a point of view, but it sort of serves the purpose of this discussion, which is, you ever eat out somewhere and it's just made without love? Like the person who's cooking is just cooking because it's their job, and you're like, this is a sad meal. And you're like, that's boring. It's just sad. Like, why did I pay money for this? And then you have a meal that's, why most of us love our mom's cooking, right? But when you have a meal that's made by somebody who really loves cooking and loves making what they're making, it goes into it, right? So, in the same way that when there's stuff made with or without love, love for the medium, love for the subject, love for whatever. Um, when something's made without a point of view, we also know that too. You're like, I don't know, like this thing the other week with the artist who tapes a banana to a wall with a piece of duct tape and sells it for $6 million, and then some crypto bro buys it and eats the banana. Like, why? I'm so somebody's gonna get mad at me for that one, but like, why?
I don't know. I think that was about money more than anything else.
Why?
I don't know. Okay, here's one for you. What is your favorite book, movie, song, or podcast? You can like whatever. All you can name like 5 of your favorite or
That's
one or
that's a lot of different things there.
I like a lot of information.
Yeah, I'll
a lot of data.
Oh yeah, I'll cherry pick around this. So when it comes to um, book, it would probably be um, it would probably be uh, Neil Stephenson's The Diamond Age. Um, it's a weird ass book, but there are certain things about that book that I constantly come back to, and I reread it like every couple of years. But the main idea in there is that there is a book that is intelligent, and that it is meant to be a lifelong learning partner for the child that bonds with it as soon as they're given it. And with everything that's going on in AI, I'm not trying to say that I want to create a child's book that bonds with the child, but there's something that's interesting to me about this as a learning opportunity that because if an AI has all the answers, then the thing that we've all been judged on our entire lives, like, do you have the answer? If you don't have the answer, don't raise your hand. Don't talk about anything. Just sit there, right? That goes out the window. Everything that we've been trained to have, like, you have to have the right answer. Well, I mean, we walk around with our phones in our pockets. That has the answer to just about everything anyway. But when you have AI where you can just sort of blurt out, hey, what's this? And it gives you the answer. Now, the value is who can come up with the best questions, right? So, um, another book that I would recommend to anybody who is getting into design at the very least. I don't know that it probably would apply to artists as well, but Richard Saul Wurman wrote a book back in 2000 called Information Anxiety 2. And it goes in and out of print, but understanding how information and how we choose to organize ourselves and how we choose to organize it for one another. I think that is utterly fascinating to me because we don't necessarily take a lot of time studying that. We talk about like the root causes of like our psychological responses, but not necessarily like there's this other thing that we take for granted, and it does have a huge impact on how we look at things. And so if you take that and mix it together with the stuff that's in the Diamond Age, there's this interesting thing about like, can we make ourselves better with different ways of approaching like the same idea? So it's like a book, but it's not really a book. It's something that interacts with you and flexes based on what you know and don't know. And then when you think about how profoundly all of this stuff affects us and how we have a screen on near us almost all the time. There's some music playing, the TV's on, the iPad's there, your phone is there. There's all of these different things competing for our attention. And I wonder about, can you use this to help people improve themselves from an intellectual perspective, or can you help them regulate all these different things that they may not even know that they're aggravating and that sort of stuff? So yeah, those two books, very different. One's very sort of like, this is more like knowledge based, and the other one is just out there. Uh, so uh, there's probably a bunch of other books, but those are the two that are at the top. Music is very important to me. So being able to say like, this is it is very difficult for me. The Beatles occupy a very large spot in my musical appreciation, but I also like things that make me feel on extremes. So Nine Inch Nails, for as aggressive as it is, it's like there's something about that. Like when I'm in that aggro mode, it's like the thing that I reach for. So, like the Downward Spiral, it's like a dark, depressing, and really loud album, aggressive. Uh, and that gives me a place to put that. But like something like Loveless by My Bloody Valentine. It's like woozy and spacey and a wall of sound. It occupies all of your senses all at once as soon as the first note hits. And there's something that's really nice about the emotional response that you get from something like that. Um, and then there's like, the stuff that makes you want to jump up and party. And, there's so many different things like it's too big, too broad. And then obviously from a movie perspective, like I still, as a grown ass adult, love Star Wars. And it's because it was so formative to me. And I think there were a lot of things that appealed to it, but like the underlying message, and it's like you understand it one way when you're 7 years old, and you understand it differently when you're in your 50s. But it's like that, you know, don't don't let anger define you. Like it doesn't necessarily mean you're gonna, go to the dark side, but it's like don't let your anger define you. And like, use the things that come naturally that are good to do more good stuff like that. And then you have these archetypical stories of like the good guys and the bad guys, and getting away by the skin of your teeth. It's fun, it's exciting, it's like that thing that lets you be a kid. Like everything is so serious, whether it's politics or pandemics or whatever the fuck is going on today, right? It's a really fun way to just say like, yeah, this is what it was like when I was like sitting on the couch on a Saturday morning watching Looney Tunes or something like that. To me, it's just like, oh, that's a fun thing to do.
Do you have a podcast?
I don't, and it's because I didn't really realize it until like probably in the last 10 years. People have started to have words for things that you're just unaware of it. But like, I am not an auditory learner at all, at all. So if I'm listening to a podcast, it goes in one ear and out the other. Like I've already forgotten what that person was talking about by the time I turn off the car and I get into the car. I'm like, I don't know what I was just listening to. So yeah, if it's not like a stupid like serialized story, I don't listen to a lot of podcasts because it doesn't provide benefits for me. Like it's just sort of blah blah blah. And why would I listen to somebody blah 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 if I could be listening to the music that I love? And that's a happier spot for me.
I get it. Is there a book that you recommend over and over to people?
Well, like I said, the information anxiety too is one from a work perspective is one that I recommend over and over and over again because it's fascinating if you're in the field, but it's fascinating if you're not because it really does uncover in very plain language and with clear examples. Like these are all the things that are vying for your attention all day, every day. And there are ways to take these things, whether it is from a personal perspective or for others, to really like make it in a way that helps everybody go, okay, I'm a little less anxious about this. And I think it's fascinating to me because it's you can change people's minds just by thinking about some of the things that are written about in there. And that's a good thing no matter what. Like if you can have a conversation with somebody and see their point of view, and hopefully they can see your point of view, and you can understand where they're coming from, like that's a reason to keep doing that over and over again. Like if you can't have that, then what's the point, right?
I agree. Um, so what do you want to talk about that I didn't ask?
No, I don't know. We've covered a lot of like my true loves, like my music, my art, the things that I do, and the things that I'm interested in, and the things that I think are important. I mean, I don't know that I have anything like you talked about mid-century modern furniture. Like I wasn't expecting that. So yeah, I think we kind of covered all the bases, unless you can think of something.
I don't probably.
All
I'll come back.
right, well, I'll jump back on. I'll just
No, next year I'll interview you again.
All right, well, you can just call me from home and I can set my chair up right here and we can pretend.
I like being in the same room with
All right, well, I like it too.
Well, thank you so much, Adam, for letting us into your studio today. I felt inspired for sure. I always feel inspired around you. And much love.
Much love.
And we'll see you next time.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Yay.